I have two incredible stories about the Theban Legion martyrs, and if you're not sure who they were, don't worry because I'll explain it. The first account is about a vision of St. John Bosco, and the second is a legend from the Rhine, shared by a good friend of mine. The second story is so good that I was literally jumping up and down as I was reading it because I couldn't wait to tell you about it.
The Catholic Men's Podcast, helping you find good works of literature for the Catholic gentleman.
The Theban Legion numbered more than 6,000 men. They were encamped near the Lake of Geneva in the southwestern part of Switzerland under the Emperor Maximian when they got orders to turn their swords against the Christian population and refused to obey. In his fury, Emperor Maximian ordered them to be decimated. The order was executed, but they endured this without a murmur or an effort to defend themselves. St. Maurice, the chief captain in this legion of martyrs, encouraged the rest to persevere and follow their comrades to heaven. "Know, O Emperor," he said, "that we are your soldiers, but we are also servants of the true God. And all things lawful we must readily obey, but we cannot stain our hands in this innocent blood. We have seen our comrades slain, and we rejoice at their honor. We have arms, but we resist not. For we would rather die without shame than live by sin." As the massacre began, these generous soldiers flung down their arms, offered their necks to the sword, and suffered themselves to be butchered in silence. Okay, so after a little bit of background, you should know that the Blessed Virgin Mary revealed where two of them were martyred to St. John Bosco. He was an Italian priest who ran an oratory school for boys in the 1800s and received over 170 mystical dreams or visions, which often foretold future events with perfect accuracy. This particular vision, recounted in Volume 2 of his biographical memoirs, took place in 1845, when Don Bosco had already started his apostolate with young men, but couldn't find a suitable home for all of them. He had gone to bed in desolation, not even suspecting that he would receive a great consolation from Our Lady in the form of a mystical dream. It was a promise of a future home for the boys, a massive oratory school. "It seemed to me that I was in a great plain full of an endless quantity of young men," Don Bosco wrote. "Some were brawling, others were blaspheming. Here they were stealing, and over there they were offending good morals. A swarm of stones then could be seen in the air, thrown by them in battle. They were young men abandoned by relatives and corrupted. I was about to move away from the chaos when I saw a lady beside me who said, 'Advance among those young men and work.' I advanced, but what to do? There was no place to gather them, but she wanted to do them good. There were people in the distance who were watching and who could have been of good support to me, but no one listened to me and no one helped me. I then turned to that lady who said to me, 'Here's a place,' and she showed me a meadow. 'That's only a meadow,' I said. She answered, 'My son and the apostles had not an inch of land where to lay their heads.' I began to work in that meadow, admonishing, preaching, and confessing, but she saw that for the most part, all efforts were in vain, unless a place was found enclosed and with some building where they could be gathered. Then that lady led me a little further to the north and said, 'Observe.' And I, looking, saw a small church, a little courtyard, and young men in great numbers. I resumed my work, but this church having become too small, I resorted again to her, and she showed me another much larger church with a house nearby. Then leading me a little farther to a tract of cultivated land almost in front of the facade of the second church, she added, 'In this place where the glorious martyrs of Turin, Adventor, and Octavius suffered their martyrdom. On this clay that was bathed and sanctified by their blood, I want God to be honored in a very special way.' Our Lady, by placing her foot on the specific area on the ground, pointed out the exact location of their martyrdom. Well, I wanted to place something to mark it for when I returned to that field another time, but I found nothing around me, not even a stone. Nevertheless, I memorized the location. It corresponds exactly to the inner corner of the Chapel of the Holy Martyrs on the Gospel side in the Church of Mary Help of Christians. Now, after seeing all this, I talked about it with others and spoke of it as if it were already done. And it's for this reason that many believed I was a raving madman. Hence originated that unshakable faith in the good outcome of Our Lady's mission, a confidence in facing all sorts of obstacles, a tenacity in colossal undertakings superior to human strength, and yet leading them all to a very happy end. This consoling vision reminds us of a verse from the book of Sirach. He who fears the Lord is never alarmed, never afraid, for the Lord is his hope. Don Bosco wrote, I never wanted to tell anyone about this dream, and much less to manifest my well-founded opinion about the precise place of the martyrdom. So in 1865, I suggested to Canon Lorenzo Gastaldi to write and print a book on the lives of the three particular martyrs of the Theban legion, Adventor, Octavius, and Solutor. I asked him to make studies, drawing from history, tradition, and topography to discover what place in the city had their martyrdom occurred. He found that the three had fled the massacre at Aggenum, which is in modern-day Switzerland, and that two of the fugitives, Adventor and Octavius, had in fact taken shelter outside the gates of the city near the river Dora, and that they were discovered and killed by the executioners at their hiding place. That vast tract of land extending from the walls of Turin to the river had been called in Latin Vallum Occisorum, the Valley of the Slain. Now it's called Valdoco, from the first syllables of those words. The author concluded that, consulting the ancient topography of the city, Don Bosco's oratory of St. Francis de Sales stood near that blessed place, or perhaps contained it within its walls. St. John Bosco was delighted beyond measure with this answer, for it confirmed what he had learned in his dream. So now that you know that the whereabouts of the Theban legion martyrs have a habit of showing up in mystical dreams, I think it gives further credence to this next account taken from a book that I've used before on the channel, The Finest Legends of the Rhine by Wilhelm Roland. Keep in mind that I've personally walked along the banks of the River Rhine and can attest to the strange wonderment and mystery of that blessed land. The story's called The Roman Ghosts. Before the gates of the old Roman town of Bonn rises a mountain of moderate height called Kreuzberg, or Cross Mountain. In early medieval times, pious pilgrims went to this sacred place in order to kneel on the holy steps of the old convent church, so rich in memories of the martyrs, or to pray in the chapel. On the same spot at the beginning of the 4th century, the great saints of the Theban legion, Cassius and his companions Florentius and Malusius, died for the Christian faith. These martyrs were the guardian saints of the country around Bonn. Many a prayer sent up to them had graciously been fulfilled, since the time when St. Helena, the pious mother of Constantine, erected a chapel to their honor at Kreuzberg. Once upon a time, a simple peasant from the neighboring country went on a pilgrimage to St. Cassius's burial place. He came to ask the kind martyr for assistance in his distress. Dransdorf was his village, formerly called Trajan's village, because the general, who later went on to become Emperor Trajan, is said to have had a villa there. A bad harvest had brought troubles on the peasant, but he firmly believed that through the intercession of St. Cassius, he would receive money enough in one way or another to enable him to pay his many debts. On arriving at Kreuzberg, he began his religious exercises by confessing his sins to one of the monks belonging to the order of St. Francis. Then, according to custom, he knelt in succession on one sacred step after the other till he reached the chapel. His wife had carefully put a candle in his pocket, which he now lighted before the image of St. Cassius. Having thus fulfilled all the duties prescribed by the church, he turned homewards, well content with himself. When he crossed the principal square of the town, where already at the time the magnificent minster stood, he entered this church to pray once more and to put another coin into the poor box. Twilight was creeping through the aisles, and a pilgrimage being not at all an easy thing, our peasant soon fell asleep over his prayer book. He only awoke when somebody pulled him by his sleeve. It was the sacristan with a big bunch of keys. At first, the peasant gazed drowsily at the unwelcome intruder. Then, with astonished eyes, he looked round about him, until at last it dawned upon him that he must get up and leave the church. Rousing himself, he made the sign of the cross, and then left the minster with tottering steps. The night winds rustled in the old lime trees of the square and seemed to whisper strange tales into the ears of the late wanderer. An ancient Roman tower, the remains of the high fortifications erected by the soldiers of Drusus 1800 years ago, stands in the narrow lane leading from the Minster Square to the Sterntor. To the tired wanderer, this tower seems a splendid shelter, all the more so as it wouldn't cost him a penny. He entered it, and tired out with the weary day, he was soon fast asleep, as if he had never been stirred up from the bench in the minster. No sexton with noisy keys was to be feared, and yet in his sleep the countryman had the sensation of somebody tapping him on the shoulder. He sat up and looked round. To his amazement, he beheld a magnificent warrior standing before him, clad in a coat of mail with a Roman helmet on his head. 2 companions in similar array stood by his side. They nodded genially down to him, and it struck him that he had already seen them somewhere else. After some moments, he remembered the picture of St. Cassius and his friends in the chapel at Kreuzberg. There was no doubt the 3 holy martyrs stood in person before him. Our good peasant was so much awed at this discovery that he couldn't utter a word, but on a sign from his mysterious visitors, he followed them at a respectful distance. They marched towards the Sterntor, straight into the building, the walls of which were as thick as the rooms were long in the peasant's humble little cottage. In the middle of a high vault there was a table covered with sparkling gold. At this unusual sight, the peasant opened his eyes very widely indeed, but his astonishment changed into keen delight when one of his ghostly visitors filled his left pocket and another his right with the glittering metal. Meanwhile, the third man took a tumbler from the middle of the table and presented it to him with an encouraging smile. Though the simple man couldn't understand a word of their conversation, he interpreted the kind invitation quite correctly, and shouting out a merry "Vivat!" as a salute to his hosts, he emptied the tumbler at one big draught. The whole building resounded with the echo, "Vivat!" The 3 warriors looked pleased and answered in a cheerful voice, "Vivat! Vivat!" And then, all at once, it seemed to the peasant as if the vault was filled with a multitude of Roman soldiers who all called out to him, "Vivat!" as if happy to hear a sound of their native language in the country of the north. The man from Drensdorf became quite high-spirited and kept on shouting, "Vivat! Vivat!" Suddenly startled by the noise he made, he awoke and found himself lying on the floor of the Roman tower in Sterngasse. The events of the night only seemed to him like a strange dream, but when he felt in his pockets, he found them stuffed with real golden coins of a strange ancient stamp. Our friend's joy became quite uproarious. After having sent up a heartfelt thanksgiving to St. Cassius, he gave vent to his delight by shouting through the quiet streets at the top of his voice, "Vivat! Vivat!" A watchman stood on duty by the Sterntor when the happy peasant passed by. He made a step forward and, reaching out his arm, he gave the merry man a rude knock with his lance. Unmindful of this rough admonition, the peasant related the event in the Roman tower to the watchman, and finished his story by inviting the stern man of duty to an early draught at the nearest inn. Rumors of the wonderful event spread far and wide, and soon every town and village knew the tale. The small lane was called Vivat Lane, and bears that name to the present day. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.